Recently, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on things, whether it's regarding my personal life, my experiences, the world at large, or something entirely different. It feels like I've been even more introspective than usual. When it comes to all this, one of the main things I've been reflecting on so much is just simply the internet as a whole. With my age now, I'm genuinely part of a generation that was able to grow up alongside the internet. And though the internet has certainly evolved even in my time on this planet, that fact is still incredibly striking to me. This giant online space has been a part of me since basically the very beginning. Since I was a kid, I was already plugged into it, watching YouTube videos, searching up things I was curious about, and seeing things I wish I didn't see. But something that stands as even more striking than all of this is thinking about what I missed. A time where the internet wasn't so giant. A time where the concept of going online was not at all just something that was to be taken for granted. It was something special, a time where there was less control. Whenever we decide to cover an internet mystery, this feeling usually comes up, especially if it's regarding an old website like Death in Hell and See Me Rot. Even if you don't visit those websites yourself, I don't think it's hard at all for you to agree that when you just look at those sites, things just feel different. Even though those places are incredibly disturbing and strange, somehow still despite that, I'd find myself getting so envious of the time where the majority of the websites looked like that. Even though I've been exposed to the internet for as long as I can remember, that was not something that I could ever experience, but I wish I could have. But what if there was a way? Thankfully, today there do exist many archival sites, one of which even being called the Old Net, in places like the Wayback Machine, essentially giving you the ability to take any existing website and see what it looked like all those years ago. But there's one place that takes these possibilities even further. Today there exists a site called Wibby.org, which is a very special ability. It only indexes sites that do not use JavaScript, the programming language that a stunning 98% of all websites in the world use today. To add on to this, Wibby also has the ability to randomize and send you to a completely random website. Again, due to just how common JavaScript is, when it randomizes and sends you to a website, it will almost always be someplace that is ancient by internet standards. Places from long before the internet was monetized or commercialized. Places that I'd always longed to see, but now in a way, I can. That's pretty much what this video is going to be about. As you can tell, it's very, very different than usual, but basically what I wanted to do here was live up to the title and just explore the old internet. Something even more exciting about this is due to the fact that not every old website was as bombastic as a See Me Rot or a Death in Hell. In taking this journey that we are about to foray in, maybe you will find that there are some true takeaways that we can make regarding the internet as a whole, and even some deeper things to ponder. Without further ado, let's simply get started. Tonight, we're just going to explore the old internet and see what things looked like, at least in as close of a way we can see these days. The very first site I landed on was titled Ray's Random Birdie Info. Seems simple enough, and well, it is. On this website, you can see a ton of miscellaneous info regarding birds, including things you'd want to know before owning one, especially the random stuff. But it also includes a ton of other information and stories about Ray's own birds. One of the highlights on the website is a section called Stupid Bird and Owner Tricks, which includes a ton of true stories from Ray's birds, including stories about how their bird, who was originally named Chaos, named himself Cheap. Really, this site is full of things like that, and as you can tell, it certainly lives up to the title. It's just one person's blog full of something he's very passionate about, and it even has a section about Ray specifically as well. All in all, it is simple, but very endearing. There is no big mystery or weird thing about this site that makes it feel off. It's genuinely just an ode to a wonderful type of companion. Info about the site states that it was established all the way back in 1994, and it appears to have been last touched in 2009, at least from what I can see. This site includes a multitude of links to other places, most of which sadly don't exist anymore, but it is really sweet to see this place still standing after all these years. For our second site, here is Internet Explorer is Evil. This is exactly the type of thing I hope to find too, because look at these animations. Anyways, as you can tell, it very much lives up to the title, giving a plethora of reasons as to why this would be the case. The poster was calling it bloated, invasive, and it even began mentioning how this type of behavior is going to leave Microsoft to monopolize the entire internet. However, it doesn't end here. There is a humor section that makes a ton of tongue-in-cheek jokes about Internet Explorer, and then there's also a miscellaneous section full of rants. Craziest of all, it is still being updated to this day. From the time of recording, there was an update as recently as November, and all these years later, it truly doesn't look like much has changed. These rants are full of more cynicism regarding the internet, except of course for the modern day. There's complaints about the sluggish nature of Windows 11 and other things such as how this user can't support Google anymore. There's information about the creator of the website as well, with a section featuring even more strong opinions about stuff. That's about all there is to it, but to me it is interesting to see a live account from the time of somebody seeing the internet beginning to change. The third site I found seemed to just be called Housefly, and as I arrived, I was just greeted with the phrase, "You'll catch death out here, hurry in." Accompanied with that is very simply just 4 images, each of which being clickable. Right off the bat, I could tell that this was going to be some sort of art project, but I was very eager to play along and see what exactly it had in store. I decided to click image 2 first just because it was a door, and inside of it there was a poem. Also on the page was some foreboding art and a 3D animation that said, "Is anyone there?" And it was clickable. Upon clicking that, we have another poem as well, as some more old school looking 3D art. When clicking this one, things get stranger. There's now an eerie face with 2 spinning chairs. After reading one more poem, you are then sent back to the start as it appears that the room is complete. The rest of the rooms take a similar route, as they all have strange art and poems. One of the ones that really stood out to me was this one. It has an illustration of what appears to be a woman's face with text in the background repeating the phrase, "No one likes me." But if you click the face, it begins crying and everything becomes more and more intense. After that page is over, there's a full-on animation of a crying face with a cat in the foreground. This art project definitely appears to be more personal, as some of the poems are very specific, and that picture of the cat makes me wonder if that is the pet the creator of the site lost in the past. One more thing I must mention is that this site actually is not nearly as old as everything else featured here, as this site was actually made with the NeoCities engine, which is something I wanted to briefly mention. NeoCities is a web creation engine created in 2013 with the goal of reviving the old, unmonetized era of the internet. It was inspired by GeoCities, which was a hugely popular web hosting service founded in 1994 and eventually purchased by Yahoo in 1999, where it quickly began disintegrating until it was finally ended in 2009. In talking about the old internet, there was no way that could be done without mentioning GeoCities. It was completely free to use and unmonetized and served as one of the most powerful symbols of this era. If we ever do another deep dive into the old internet, we will try and figure out if there's a way to surf old GeoCities sites. Next up, I found something much more simple, a shrine to the NES game Kid Icarus, as the site itself says. Kid Icarus is one of my favorite NES games. I played it a lot and beat it quite a few times. It is often called the companion game to Metroid, and the 2 games do share a similar graphic and music style. Unlike Metroid, Kid Icarus' setting is not outer space, but a mythical world based somewhat in part on Greek mythology, although many of the monsters are unlike anything you've ever seen before. It has that same sort of dark and gloomy atmosphere of Metroid, which sort of gives it a gothic feeling. Kid Icarus is also one of the most difficult games for the NES. This shrine is meant to showcase one of my favorite and most unusual games. And that's exactly what the site does. There's a section all about the characters, the enemies, music, and there are even sections about fan art. Once again, similar to the first site, it's heartwarming to see a place created by one person just showcasing a singular passion. And speaking of singular passions, let's check out Jeff's Robots, a place where Jeff is clearly very passionate about robots as he seeks to collect them. You can tell this one is old too, because not only does it have a copyright from 1997, it also says that this site is best at an 800 by 600 resolution. It also features more very charming 3D animations, one of my favorite staples that some of these old websites used to have. The collection of robots truly does seem to be vast too. A site that I found incredibly fascinating upon taking this journey was one called amcho.com, and the reason why is because it is a very old place, talking about the concept of the internet. As the headline says, "What can the internet do for me?" And as you can see, this website lays out some of the important things the World Wide Web can do for you, starting with email. This is probably the least hyped part of the electronic revolution. It is also the easiest to understand, and is also probably the most useful. Think of email as a clever fax machine. With a fax, you can send and receive pages of information. You can do the same with email, but without having to print the pages first. For example, instead of printing out your order to a supplier and then faxing it, all you need to do is click a few buttons on the screen and the message can be emailed, not to a public fax machine, but directly to the person who will deal with your order. When you receive an email, rather than having to rekey all the information, it is already on your computer. All you need to do is copy and paste it into any other application, such as a report in a word processor. Email messages can be forwarded to whoever needs to deal with the message next. It then talks more about the internet and websites as a whole. If it wasn't worth it, all the large companies would not be there. The larger companies are there because they can see a possible source of profit and are afraid of missing out on the bonanza. There are many stories of websites that are making a fortune. These I think should be taken with a pinch of salt. The sites that are probably making money are those selling pictures on a pay-by-view basis. Maybe the quality is better if you pay for it. Possibly the search engines are making money through advertising. But probably the greatest benefit is to existing businesses that use the internet as a tool to improve their existing business. Read the story by Michael Schreiner of how Microvision computer products use the internet to make the business grow and become more profitable. The main reason for most companies being on the internet is to provide information about themselves and their products to the general public and their customers and suppliers. Treat your website like an entry in the yellow pages, but with the added advantage of being able to answer many of your potential customers and suppliers' questions before they need to phone you. Some companies are using the internet to save costs. If you think about it, if you are answering the telephone and most of the questions are similar, then putting the info on the web must be a lot cheaper, on the condition that your target audience has access to the web. Examples that come to mind are train timetables, freight transport. At the bottom of the site, we can see when this article was written, August 1997, reviewed in 1998, and in 1999. And to me, it was just a really captivating read. Just seeing the internet being described in this way puts so much into perspective, thinking about it in terms of evolution and seeing firsthand how it was thought of when it was fresh. Next up, we have a site all about Furbies. Except it's not about buying them or talking about how cute they are. No, this site is about Furby autopsies. It mentions how they had a particular Furby for about 3 days. 2 of those days it was spent sleeping, and then after that, his batteries ran out. After the batteries were replaced, the Furby supposedly began acting really weird. His eyes were stuck half open, it was making a weird buzzing noise, and resetting it would not help at all. At some point it even began smelling, so this left only one option. Dozens of experiments with trying to unjam and reset and reboot him were unable to restore him to healthy operation. Tulika was definitely a terminally ill Furby. So we did what any bereaved Furby owner would do, we cut him up and took pictures. So in case you ever wondered, here is a step-by-step guide of how to give a Furby an autopsy. This autopsy took place in 1998, meaning that this is likely around when the website was created too. And it's just so weirdly macabre, even though we're talking about a toy. There's a section about the Furby's guts, its cause of death, and much, much more. There's even a frequently asked questions section full of questions like, does Furby learn? Do you hate Furbies? Does Furby hear, see? And last but not least, can a Furby catch fire? For our final website for the time being, we're going to talk about one that, in all honesty, is pretty tragic. A site all about a son creating a tribute and trying to help his dad. This is SaveWalterWhite.com. Walter White apparently is a high school chemistry teacher and someone being described as annoyingly smart. And I feel like we all know somebody like that. His son also was in high school and decided to try and see if he could raise funds for surgery. A truly noble and sweet act. As we can see from this paragraph, we can tell just how deeply they all care about each other. Walter White in here seems like a true family man, someone who would never ever hide anything from them. A man of total honesty. Weirdly, when you try to donate, it actually takes you to AMC's website. I mean, how random and weird is that? Did they think Walter White is an actor or something? Well, there you have it. We've just explored the old internet. at least to the best ability that we can for now, and the results really were telling. As we saw, the majority of the websites were technically pretty mundane. We saw a site about birds, an art project, a video game series, robotics, an essay, and Walter White. And throughout all of this, it put into even greater perspective just how much things have changed, confirming many of the things I said at the start. We saw a time where the internet was seen as exciting. It was seen as a place for creativity, for hobbyists to share their passions with the world, and of course, for people in all reaches of the planet to communicate with one another. It was a place that, to me, seemed in a strange way to almost mirror, though very rapidly, humanity's evolution. Many lifetimes ago, living was all about hunting for food and survival. The world was huge, mostly untouched, full of mystery and unknowns, and there weren't any rules yet. But as time passed, things evolved. Rules were created and enforced, monopolies were born. I think in a way a huge part of the allure to the internet was to escape what the world had become. The internet was a symbol of freedom when it was born, but that simply is not the reality that we live in anymore. Much like how the world changed over time, so did the internet, except much, much more rapidly. Nowadays, the reality of the internet is becoming much closer to real life. A small selection of companies are now in control of the majority of all content readily available for us to see. And because of this, though the internet is much larger today than it was 20 years ago, it certainly feels smaller, doesn't it? All of what is being said here feels remarkably bleak, and in some ways it is. There is definitely an element of fear I could completely understand being felt when thinking about the internet's evolution in this way. However, there may be a light, even if it is a small one, at the end of the tunnel. If there was one other thing we saw throughout this journey through internet time, it was that a shockingly high number of these websites were still being updated. That raises the question, how many of these classic old internet websites are still out there, still being given the same type of love that people gave websites decades ago? I have a feeling there may be more of them out there than you think, and though they are frustratingly and sadly difficult to find, it is relieving that this bygone era does still live on in a way. As this video comes to a close, I want to end it on a question. For those of you that did get to experience this old internet, what are some of the fondest memories you have from this time? If we could turn a subject such as this into a discussion or recollection, I think that would be very fitting. As someone who was there, the old internet truly did feel like an entirely different beast than what we have now. It felt like reading an infinite book, every website and page like picking up a rock and seeing what's living underneath. Admittedly, some of that was the sheer novelty of it all making it seem more magical, but I feel like the corporatization of the internet really killed the soul of it. Pre-commodified internet is absolutely incredible, a true testament to human nature. It feels like the spirit of humanity enshrined in pixels. I could look at old websites for hours. My fondest memory of the old internet is a mailing list dedicated to an anime I used to love. It was the first time I ever got involved in a fandom, and I made my first internet friends there. We had a ton of fun, talked every day, shared fan art, fan fiction, roleplay, and just fun conversations. It all began to dwindle till no one replied anymore, and mailing lists stopped being a thing. I still remember them very fondly. Our journey into the depths of the old internet was a really special experience, and it appears we were not alone in this feeling that it gave. Seeing a place we all use every single day look so different was an eye-opening and nostalgic adventure, despite the fact that we unfortunately didn't even live through most of it. And due to the unbelievable success that our Exploring the Old Internet video had, it only made sense that we would continue this journey again. The reception, some of which we just read, was greater than we possibly could have ever imagined. If you haven't seen our original Exploring the Old Internet video, I would definitely recommend you to watch that before this one. It explains the background and idea behind this all, as well as what the resource we use for these does. It'll just make a lot more sense if you see that one first. At the end of the last video, we asked people to share what the old internet was like for them, thinking that maybe our video could serve as a place to come together, to recollect, and to discuss this distant memory. And in honor of that idea, perhaps this time we can unearth even more memories for you all. It is time to explore the old internet once again. The resort is a geek house in the mountains of Santa Cruz, California. We are a fully network-connected household of 7 housemates who employ the full power of the internet to nag our housemates about chores and otherwise organize our lives. We've been the resort since 1992 and online full-time since 1994. In the future, all houses will be like the resort. However, it is likely that the people in this future will be so busy forwarding mail to their housemates that they will forget to eat and will thus die. In clicking the Geek House link, it states that a geek house is pretty much a home comprised almost entirely of computer nerds, and along with that definition, it says that there are a number of these houses in the Santa Cruz area, and below this, it shows pretty much all of them that are known. I tried to click some of these other clickable pages for the supposed other geek houses, and unfortunately it seems that the vast majority of these links are dead, but I did find a few that worked. One of them was the abattoir, and wow, is this website colorful. Residents of the abattoir are heavily armed at all times and will kill intruders on sight. Happy New Year! Of the few other links I found, most of them were naturally pretty personal, with photos of these house inhabitants and not much else. But this whole Geek House section certainly explains what the resort is all about. With the way everything on the resort site is written, you can tell that a lot of it is comprised of in-jokes and the things that only other people in the resort would probably understand fully. There's a place called Meet the Resort that explains the origins of this place and how it came to be. 7-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2,600 square foot on 2-acre pool spa. 1992. Who wouldn't jump at a chance to live somewhere like that? The resort was formed when Solgood and Banshee decided that they needed to stop living in small houses and furthermore needed to establish a geek house of unparalleled magnitude. They had lived in the Parrington dorm for 4 years at UCSC and had lived in separate houses in Santa Cruz for a few years. Banshee really wanted to live in the woods and Solgood really wanted a geek house. So Banshee found this ad in the classifieds that appeared to have everything they both wanted. Privacy, forest setting, lots of space, lots of bedrooms, a pool, and a spa. Though their current housemates were rather displeased, they went ahead and tried to organize a motley crew to secure this wilderness retreat. They pulled in Fez, a friend from work who had gotten tired of living alone. They pulled in Pickery and Vag, with whom Banshee had spent much of the spring of '92 getting trashed. LaFole was a friend from Parrington looking for inexpensive housing. Angel was a friend from the UCSC computer system who wanted a housing change. With these 7 assembled and much bickering about who was to buy the toilet paper later, the resort was born. To me, there's just something really sweet about seeing a group of younger people dream of all living together, actually making that happen, and then opening a website to document all about it. And the fact that they still may be living there all these years later only adds to this. This is certainly one of the eeriest websites I've come across so far during this journey, and it's also a rare website that is clearly very new too. The contents of the site is just a YouTube link. The site is called spotthedrowningchild.com. The video in question also bears the same name, and in it you, well, do just that. The video in question has a fixed camera of a wave pool with dozens and dozens of people in view, except at one point, one of the kids begins drowning, which is spotted by the lifeguard almost instantly, who jumps in and saves the kid. Being posted on a channel called Lifeguard Rescue, I think this video was made to show how important lifeguards can really be, and it also shows how difficult the job can be. There were so many people in view that it seems very, very difficult to pay perfect attention to them all, especially when drowning can be so quiet. But this lifeguard saw it instantly and saved a life. The description of the video says, "Peer pressure in pools can lead to dangerous situations. The person who winds up being rescued is just trying to make it back to his girlfriend. Instead of asking for help, which would have been embarrassing, he decided to chance it. This is a good example of someone who goes vertical and can't make any meaningful swimming motions." Next up, we have Wobbletown. It appears as if this website is about a specific type of virtual pet. As we can see, there is a current population of 76 of them, all in different shapes and sizes. Clicking each of them also gives information about every individual creature, and even more interestingly, an entire different look to the webpage in question. Many of them appear to have been abandoned, and it looks like you can even feed these abandoned ones even if they aren't yours. In going to the Wobbletown manual, we can learn more. We don't know much about what exactly wobbles are or where they come from. They have been discovered for the first time when Brood, as he walked back home in the early morning after spending the night at the Midnight Pub, saw a weird-looking egg near a pond in Dusk's End, Nightfall City. That night, Brood might have had one too many drinks. He didn't know if he was hallucinating. But then the egg hatched and a funny-looking creature just came out. It wobbled as it tried to stand up. Soon after, Brood realized that there were many eggs all around this pond. He decided to call this place Wobbletown. and to tell all his friends about it so they can care for those little wobbly creatures. Below it, we can read that these creatures need to be fed about every 24 hours, and that they'll leave after 5 days without any food. It also shows us that this website was heavily inspired by Tamagotchis, which is something I was already thinking about. There's even a lab section of the site that gives you even more lore. If I'm being honest, I have absolutely no idea how old or new this website really is. With just a select amount of creatures there, this place certainly seems very hidden compared to most of the internet. It looks like it was most likely made less than 10 years ago, but maybe just like the Wobblers themselves, it's hundreds of years old, reaching beyond the internet entirely. And speaking of online websites, here is nightfall.org, one of the coolest websites I have found out of all of them so far. Nightfall is one of the oldest multi-user dungeons still alive, running continuously since 1993, while first opening to the public in 1990. MUDs are text-based multiplayer online games to check out the enormous landscape Nightfall has to offer. Connect to nightfall.org at port 4242 using your favorite Telnet client. Have a look at our description of various clients or use the web client. If you want to get a feel without connecting now, the guide might be an interesting read, and of course you are welcome to check out our notes on the different races, guilds, and history past and present. For the impatient, the map of Nightfall is especially worth seeing. There's a short quick smart manual available as well as a rather extensive introduction to Nightfall and MUDs in general. As someone very unfamiliar with games like this, it definitely was a bit overwhelming, but the amount of information and depth available is simply astounding. There's tons of other sections too, one of which showing who is online right now. With an over 20-year-old game that looks like this, even though there aren't many, there's something really sweet to me about the fact that there are still people around playing it to this day. And you can even click these users to learn a little bit more about them. If you go back to the homepage and click the Don't Panic button, I realize that you can explore the game a little as a guest, so that's what I'm gonna do. As you can see, you're actually given a character selection screen, so I'm going to select North. And then I'm going to select Become Male. Now we are given multiple character options. I can be a dark elf, a demon, a dwarf, a troll. In honor of this channel's history, I'm going to become a gnome. After this, it seems that I would be able to start playing the game. Even though text-based games are primitive by their nature, I find a certain beauty in them due to the fact that you have no choice but to use your imagination through the majority of these scenarios. I'm not sure if this is a game I would actually sit down and play like that, but it's still something I respect and appreciate, especially because they don't really exist anymore. If any of these websites could serve as a reminder to what the old internet was like, this is probably it. Today I could lose myself in a world like Fallout, but back then, this was the world. It clearly has just as much depth, probably more honestly, but what we see in front of us is all there is, and all that anybody else playing with you could see as well. The world came alive through your imagination, and the online aspect was likely even more intimate. And once again, it still seems to be living on in a way, even if it is now small. Next up is a really important one. Here we have the true story of Idaho. This is an essay created for the sole purpose of proving that Idaho is not in fact a real state, and let me just say, it's pretty convincing. Do you know anybody from Idaho? Do you know anybody who knows anybody from Idaho? According to the 1990 census, there are over 1 million people living in Idaho. But if there are so many Idahoers, where are they? Some people have come forward and claimed that they were born and raised in Idaho, but every single person who made this claim have been shown to be frauds and charlatans. These Idahoan wannabes are invariably inconsistent with each other about the size, in square miles or square kilometers, of Idaho, about various town and village names, and even about the names of Idaho's mighty rivers. There's sections about satellite evidence, photographic evidence, the potato myth, and so much more. I don't know what made this man want to dig into Idaho so badly, but it was a truly hilarious read, and another moment that just made you think, how many websites exist anymore with the sole purpose of something this small and kinda just funny? At the bottom of the page we have a section that brings us back to Carl's homepage, and we can now see that he actually makes map art, many of which are actually being used on major websites. I can only assume that all the maps he made, none of them are Idaho. And well, if we're not going to Idaho, how about we just leave this planet entirely? If you ever wanted a place for that, we may have found one. This is Alien Ground. Really, it's a simple but super charming place. It's all about giving you some free gifts and wallpapers all relating to UFOs or aliens. And all of them are just really charming, old school 3D art. We've got some UFOs flying over houses, planets orbiting, gifts for your email, and Goku? Well, you can definitely say this place has variety. Finally, we'll explore eviloverlord.com, a place made by a true internet supervillain. This website is all about the top 100 things that this person would do if he was an evil overlord, but most of them are the small inconveniences that are of course so much worse than anything else. Things like, my ventilation ducts will be too small to crawl through, or I will never utter the sentence, but before I kill you, there's just one thing I want you to know. All the weird cliches would not be happening with this guy in charge. On the cell block A and B links, you get even more evil overlord scenarios. At the bottom of the site, it appears as if this website had won some awards in the past. It was given Cruel Site of the Day in 1996 and Worst of the Web in 1997. At the bottom of the page, we can go to the Evil Overlord homepage, which includes a message from the Evil Overlord CEO. So in case you ever wanted to study up on what it may take to become a true evil overlord, that is the place to go. As this video begins to come to a close, once again, all of these websites we visited reinforced all of the key points and ideas we talked about last time. It showed us that there was a time where the internet wasn't very corporate, a time where sites were mostly made out of passion and of sharing your interests, or just simply having fun. And this fact was what made the old internet feel so special. All these things are true, but these are also all things we've clearly gone over. Many comments in our last video mentioned taking things about the internet we have today and combining it with the old internet that felt so special. But if the old internet was this incredible, why would you take any aspect of the internet we have today with us? Well, even though so many things about the old internet appear to be beautiful to my eyes and to the eyes of many, it's important to not wear totally rose-colored glasses either. For even at this time, there were of course negatives. Obviously loading times were bad, but this isn't what we were referring to. A big positive for the old internet was that feeling of freedom it gave. Anything was possible in this new revelation. Anybody could create anything they wanted. In many ways, this was an absolute blessing and created the magic we look back on now. But in certain ways, it could be seen as a curse. The lack of rules meant that it was much easier for shocking content to slip through the cracks. Whether this be terrible violence, hate speech, criminal activity, or the absolute most common offender, sexual content. As far as I have heard, the old internet had so much sexual content on it that in some ways it could be hard to escape it. Because of these things, in a weird way, I always saw the closest place to capturing the atmosphere of the old internet to be none other than 4chan. 4chan is ruthless, really inappropriate, disturbing on occasion, and all of these things, especially on old forum boards, were absolutely prevalent on the old internet. There were many wholesome, passionate websites, sure, but there were also so many websites and places full of shocking discussions, because there was nothing preventing that. Reasons like this are why you have to look at the past in an unbiased manner. In the future, we will cover many more old internet sites, most of them definitely being about the passion, the intrigue, and the beauty that the old internet had to offer. But just remember that if we truly went back to the old internet, these negatives would come with that too. So much of the old internet was about the randomness of it, randomly stumbling upon a place about somebody super passionate about birds, or randomly finding a website about why Idaho just doesn't exist. But perhaps just as common as that could be, randomly stumbling upon a website full of gruesome deaths or sexual content. And if you were exploring the internet at a younger age, that's something you probably still remember. On the internet today, the randomness that gave so much of this old era its soul is definitely for the most part gone. But as a result of that, it is a lot harder to suddenly stumble upon a place like that. Don't get me wrong, it can still occur, and that content is all still out there. I know that if I scroll through Instagram Reels for more than 5 minutes, the odds of me finding a tragic death are going to be way too high. But these things definitely aren't as commonplace as they used to be, and for the most part, you would have to seek these things out rather than it just appearing. Unsupervised internet access still meant that many of us found these horrific things at a young age, but again, those were usually seeked out specifically, which creates an entirely new argument that goes beyond just the internet itself. As it stands, this all seems to be about a balance. People want the soul of the old internet, the explorative and passionate nature of it. Because of this, we'll just keep looking back. We'll imagine what it could have been like if these things combined the way we wish it did, and next time we'll explore a web hosting service we've talked about in lengths already, but truly give it its flowers. When thinking of an old website, chances are high that you are thinking about GeoCities. This web hosting service, which originated in 1994, was at one point the third most browsed site on all of the internet. It is probably best known for these charming designs that express greater than words could the special revolution that the internet really was in its infancy. On GeoCities, perhaps more than anywhere else, you were able to see the true spirit and passion that humanity could express when given the freedom and excitement to. On GeoCities, you could just create whatever you wanted, and create is what people did. In 1999, GeoCities was purchased by Yahoo in what would unfortunately be the beginning of the end. Things were okay at the start, but as time passed, it became more and more clear that Yahoo wanted to move on from the service, and in 2009, that's exactly what happened. In April of that year, GeoCities was closed, which permanently destroyed the most amount of history ever on the internet. Millions and millions of web pages vanished overnight, never to be seen again. Luckily for us though, some of it was saved. There are multiple people that have made it a mission to archive as many GeoCities websites as possible, and that means that many of them have miraculously been saved. In this video, I can't randomly be shown websites in the way that Wibby did, but in these archives, there are thousands upon thousands of websites to randomly scroll past and explore. That's why in this edition of Exploring the Old Internet, that's exactly what I'm going to do. GeoCities had many hubs. There was Area 51 for websites about science fiction, fantasy, conspiracies. There was Hollywood for websites about film and television. There was Times Square for websites about computer games and RPGs. Every one of these sections had many more subsections, and these are just a few examples. While I definitely can't explore everything, I'm going to attempt to go through a number of these sections to unearth some more old websites that haven't been seen in decades. The website we'll be using throughout this entire video is geocities.restorativeland.org, and the second you get there, you're already hit with how huge this archive really is. There's all these headers like we mentioned previously, and under each of them is a giant swath of subsection links that lead you to all sorts of websites. Regardless, I want to see what this archive has to offer. Why not start at the first heading, Area 51, and why not subsection Dreamworld? That has to be good. The first website that really caught my eye is the unofficial website of The Shape, Michael Myers. Clicking into the website itself, you immediately start to notice the 8-bit sounding Halloween movie theme music. The website has that great old school feel that we'll become very acquainted with by the end of the video. There's a whole bunch of clickable links too. I wonder what could be behind some of these. I wanted to check out the link My Image Board, but unfortunately that link was completely lost, so let's check out the link Michael Myers. This area is super weird, the way the text is lined up, but the theories in here about whether or not Michael Myers was truly evil are classic. I love the what if scenarios this obvious superfan poured a ton of thought into. Why not one more link before we move on? My Mask Pics. It has to be what we're all thinking. Yep, look at that, it's a bunch of pictures of the website's author's very own Michael Myers mask. I wonder if this is a prop mask or homemade. Either way, it is really cool to see the utter dedication to the infamous shape all over this ancient site. We started in Dreamland, and I'm honestly curious what else it has since we're here. Man, it is just X-Files fanfic after X-Files fanfic. Why not try something else? Let's try something in the Hollywood header. I wonder what the bungalow subsection could be about. Well, this one caught my eye. Disney Girls homepage. This site isn't that much to look at on the surface, it seems, but let's give it a shot and click one of the links. As a Disney World regular, my absolute favorite part of the park was Tomorrowland, so let's start there. Well, there's really nothing here. Why not New Orleans Square? Well, this one has a clickable link to a part about the Haunted Mansion, which of course is one of the most iconic stops in all of This whole page is just a transcript for the ride audio, and at the top it says,
I've always had trouble remembering the words to the Haunted Mansion. Guess what? I'm saving you the trouble. Here goes, have fun.
I love the implication being that this person memorized the entire ride's transcript and wrote it down after a day at Disneyland. There's some clickable links throughout the script, and it's audio from the actual ride, which is super cool.
This chamber has no windows and no doors. And now a carriage approaches.
I wonder when this audio is from, if it was recorded by the author or from somewhere else. There's lots of pictures of the ride as well, again probably taken by the author. The lengths this author went to transcribe this entire ride on this website is astounding. I mean, the internet didn't exist like we know today, so there were no ride-throughs or anything like that, so this was memorized and scribed completely by memory. Alright, let's try one more link here. How about the star of the show, Main Street, USA, one of the coolest places in all of Disney. This one is a bit similar to Tomorrowland, but I love the inclusion of everything, and I mean everything. The shops, restaurants, everything. I'm sure there are plenty of Disney sites that used to be big on GeoCities, but this was the first that I found, and man, I am really impressed with the absolute dedication it took to put it all together. Taking a break from looking through the website, since that was only half of GeoCities, of course the headers and subsections were meant to lead you in the direction you wanted to go. Unfortunately, this has been translated horribly on this archive. The subsections will sometimes lead you in the right direction, like for example under header Hollywood subsection movie, I found a website all about Jurassic Park the Ride, the video game, which is not exactly a movie, but it's close enough. A lot of these websites and some of these subsections genuinely have nothing to do with each other. It definitely makes this archive a little bit harder to sift through, but honestly it feels more of a double-edged sword rather than just being completely obnoxious. Since everything is a little random and most of the websites have the name index, you get a lot more of a sense of exploration than you normally would. You genuinely have no idea what you can find, and that lends to that nostalgic feeling of stumbling on something a lot more than just looking it up directly. So, let's keep searching. Where to next? Let's head over to header Times Square subsection Arcade. I'm sure there's plenty of awesome old school pages about retro video games, and hopefully the subsection is somewhat on theme. This site is just called Homepage. I wonder what that means. Oh yeah, it's genuinely just a website to save for your homepage. It's got all the links to everything you need to start accessing the internet, and even 30 years later, it really hasn't aged a day. You have hot links to the Weather Channel, Yahoo Mail, and even IMDb. The website is a little bit more customized to suit the author's needs, with links to WWE.com and some Star Trek websites. On the surface, this website honestly didn't seem like much, but it's so cool to see how little things have really changed. All the essentials on this website are still very much in use and something all of us use every single day. It really bridges the gap of that old school feel in the modern day. The internet was different, but honestly not as different as you might assume at face value. I personally thought that last site was a really cool relic, but I'm sure you guys are here for something a little more action-packed. And it seemed like the Area 51 header subsection Realm might have that. A little less stationary and a bit more fun. Let's see what we find. I think I found exactly what we're all here for. This site is called Brian's Home, and you instantly start to feel that old school medieval / RuneScape vibe. The synopsis right under the title says,
Welcome to all of you, friends and foes alike. No wait, just the friends. You have found the abandoned outpost that I have chosen to make my home. Sure, it's small, but it can be quite a cozy place indeed when you light a fire in its place and add the fellowship of a few friends. Now there's no sense in having you all stand around outside the wall. Let me open the gate for you and come in at your will.
Under this message, all we have is the giant door, and lucky for us, it's clickable. I'm already loving this 3D art of this mead hall looking place. The text underneath reads,
Now that you're in out of the cold, I should show you around. From this room, you can access any part of this outpost. No, lad, you don't need to wipe your boots off. These are stone and dirt floors. I've set up this place for you to learn what you need to do to prepare yourselves to come to the Renaissance Fair. If you don't have any idea of what you are going to do, then you have a lot to do, and speaking from experience, you don't have much time to do it all. Before you sit down to do anything else, you need to see how much money you have that you can use for this. Garb is not cheap. Neither is hardly anything else at the fair. though it is all at a very fair price. Then you should work up a decent accent and learn to speak with it for long periods of time. And lastly, you may find it entertaining to make up a character to play while we are at the fair. After all, it's kind of like a big play up there. But anyway, I'll leave you all to explore for yourselves. If you have more questions than I've answered here, just mail it to me. I promise I'll answer within a reasonable time.
This has to be the coolest and most well-themed site I've seen on the entire archive so far. A completely in-character guide to your local Renaissance fair. The website was seemingly really helpful, and the author Brian really went all in, even urging you to email him about any of your questions on how to really go all in on your first Ren fair. Below the text are some links, and thankfully they're all pretty much still active, so let's go to the armory. This link has some great information about medieval weapons, their affordability, what style they were, and which weapon might be right for you, along with some awesome images of actual blades. Below everything are links to long-forgotten sword catalogs. Why don't we check something else out? How about the Legend of the Library? This page has some links that take us to either a synopsis of King Arthur or Macbeth, to really get yourself in the spirit of the Ren Fair. This is by far the coolest site I've seen so far. It's not necessarily different from the others, it still is someone's passion project website, but the amount of theming dripping through the entire thing really makes it stand out. It doesn't feel nearly as juvenile as the other websites I've seen so far, it still feels homemade while also seeming like a website a Ren Fair would use to garner hype.
Some say all the world's a stage, and if that's true, the Renaissance Fair is the headlining act. Now on with you.
We have definitely looked through the Area 51 header quite a bit. It does seem to generally have the best websites, and we aren't finished with it yet for tonight, but I figured we should probably take a look at one of the weirder headers. The header Picket Fence is so vague, and the subsection Garden seems like it would mostly be about botany. Looking at these websites, yeah, it's just about the same nonsense on every other archive link. This one looks cool, Under Construction. It's not much of a website because it's genuinely under construction. It's not finished, and the saddest part is, it never will be. This site called to me very similarly to the homepage one because it's not some wacky site, it's just a sign of the times. I do vaguely remember in my era of the internet some websites being under construction, so even though this is not my era of the internet exploration, it still feels very nostalgic. I wonder if this website was ever completed. It was placed in the garden subsection, so maybe it was meant to be about plants. The Y2K aesthetic that oozes everywhere on all these sites is on full display here, complete with the bootleg-looking Lizzie McGuire. I'm curious as to how common this was back on GeoCities, and if you guys watching ever did this with your own personal sites. I've ultimately had the best luck on this archive with the Area 51 header, and the subsection Stargate seems like it could be something. Wow, what is this?
Yo.
As we're greeted by the page, we're met by
DJ Hot Money Smooth, Me D Daddy, Ice Papa Smurf's cool page of shit.
As he shows a signature of himself, he responds,
Ladies, control yourselves. And dudes, quit wishing y'all was me, yo! Ain't room for more than one best in the world, Captain Crunch!
He tells us to look around the website and to let him know if we're enjoying it, also mentioning that he'll update it. From here on, we can see the rest that this page holds. And every last bit of it is full of that writing style and personality. It's simply insane. At the bottom of the page, there's a log of updates, with one mentioning that he's got a position at Nobody's Scared, which is a link that is no longer available. At the very bottom, there is a copyright by DJ Hot Money Smooth Mo D Daddy. You gotta be sure not to steal this website, because if you do, he'll bust a cap in your ass. Moving on, there's a section about some of his favorite artists, including Biz Markie and Johnny Cash to name a few. A potentially insane section called Thoughts on World Peace was under construction, so unfortunately we could not see what that was, and man do I wish I could have. His About Me page holds a bunch of actual images of the site author, most of them including his friends. Some of them have images of them at what appears to be parties, and they look college age. Another aspect to this that caught my eye in a strange way. A big aspect that makes all these old lost websites so fascinating to me is how they're essentially time capsules. They're moments that are likely looked back and thought of in specific instances by those same people to this day, and there's something special about that to me. I think we have time for one more website, and thankfully something in the Stargate subsection caught my eye. This is the Warhammer 40,000 unofficial chapter homepage for the Blood Angels. Now, for those who don't know, I am a massive 40k fan, and I figured now would finally be the time to talk about it. I saw multiple other 40k websites, but this one really stood out. Not only is it my favorite faction, but it has that very nostalgic roleplay feel, since a lot of it is written in character. There are quite a few links here as well. I wonder if any of them work. The only one of real interest that does work is the Vigil. It looks unfinished, but it was supposed to be the chapter gallery. The text says, "All Blood Angels visit it as a part of their training when promoted to veteran. They are put through simulations of past battles, they take the role of past heroes, and they learn from past mistakes." This part of the homepage is dedicated to the glorious history. It includes a written history, image gallery, comics, and an archive of information even remotely related to the Blood Angels. There are some glaring grammar issues, but I don't know, for this kind of website it's sort of endearing. You can tell it was made by a younger kid in the early days of the grimdark setting. I really wish this website was finished. I'm sure it would have been a really cool stop for all the Sons of Sanguinius. And for now, I think that's going to do it for this exploration into some lost, forgotten websites. As I've alluded to many times, it really is special to look at these places today. When I visited all these sites, I thought about the fact that these pages once were seen and viewed quite often, but now they haven't been seen in years, and something about that really stuck with me. On every single website we looked at, there was a charm, a carefree attitude, and a sense of wonder that was just so infectious when reading. Even though the internet today is so much larger than it was back then, and even though it's so much easier to contact people online than it ever was before, there was this sense of intimacy when looking into these old websites and the lives of the people that made it that I don't think will ever be repeated quite like this again. And I know I'm not alone in that sentiment either. Though the internet sadly moves further and further away from this era with each day passing, there are places that are attempting to bring this spirit back. NeoCities is a website that we've showcased previously, and it lives up to its name, essentially being the closest we can get to what GeoCities offered in the modern day. Archives like the one we showcased today and others can allow us to let this spirit live on, never to be forgotten. With all that being said, I figured it would only be appropriate to end this with a question. For those that experienced it, what was GeoCities like for you? What memories do you have from it that you still hold to this day? Did any of you create your very own sites on GeoCities, and if so, what were they like? I would love to see some of these answers down below. I hope that this comment section can also allow those memories to live on. There's a certain fascination to websites that have been abandoned. When you look at them, there's often a desire for you to place yourself into the shoes of its creator or the times that these places were from. When you explore them, there's such an alluring feeling to it all. These were sites that were so full of passion and heart, but at the same time, haven't been touched or even seen in decades. Take this site here. This is the classified mainframe of Lord Starscream himself, and as a massive Transformers fan, I just love this. The highlight for me is the subject called Laws. In here we have a written Decepticon handbook. Things like never turning your back on your enemy and be quick or be dead are just a few of the laws, but I love how much effort was put into everything here by an obvious superfan. Over the years, the way we use the internet changed. Personal sites like these became harder and harder to find as the corporatization of the internet really began taking effect. For many others, the novelty began wearing off. This place we call the internet, which was once a beacon of hope, creativity, and passion, is now for the most part a tool. But using that tool, we can still see what it once was. We can look back at a time where the internet was seen as a revolution, a place to share your deepest passions. Tonight, we're going to look at some forgotten old websites. So how do we find these old sites? Well, we have a few ways to do it. One of these ways is by using this website called Wibby, and it's incredible. With its randomizer button, it has the ability to unearth websites that haven't been seen in decades, so let's put it to the test. The first site that appeared for me was wastedlife.org. This site is dedicated to the idea that life is more than just the 9-to-5 grind, or the blind pursuit of wealth and property. Turn off the TV, throw away that poor excuse for a newspaper, and do something really fun. Remember all the cool ideas you had before you convinced yourself that a creative life was a wasted life? Stop doing what you're told, unless you heard it here, and dive into something deeply fulfilling. Build, write, experience, create. It's never too late. No credit card required. As you can tell, this website lives up to its title, as it's basically a showcase of various projects that the site author had made, but I appreciate the inspiring attitude it presents. Before we see the creations on this site, there's a link proving just how little you need to be creative. When you click it, we can see the humble workspace where all the owner's creations were made. These creations include a homemade hand-cranked movie camera, an accordion, and an Appalachian mountain fiddle, just to name a few. Under each invention, there's a lengthy write-up about them, basically giving the step-by-step as to how he figured out how to make these things. This is a website that I'm drawn to for a very specific reason. There's no greater mystery here, there's no weird thing that makes this all stand out. This is genuinely just a charming site all about sharing your hobbies, while also reminding us that no matter how overbearing life can get, never forget your creativity. There is always room for it, and each and every one of us is creative in our own way. In the words of the site's author, build, write, experience, create. It's never too late, no credit card required. Wibby just gave us a very fitting site to start off with, so let's see what other things it can unearth. Well, this is manualsweb.com, which seems to be another personal website. This one features a nursing section, his dog Gabby, a section about missiles, and his opinions about the very early Netflix. At the bottom, the copyright shows the years of 2000 to 2007, meaning that this site isn't quite as old as some of the others we'll get to, but it still doesn't appear to have been touched in almost 20 years. Most of the sections are pretty self-explanatory. Gabby's section shows the life of the creator's wonderful companion as the years go by, and beyond that, there's a bunch of other helpful links included. Things like my pet care tips, tips on making your own pet home page, and of course, why dogs roll and poop. However, the section I was absolutely most interested in was the Netflix section, which also appears to be the main showcase. So let's see what this consumer has to say about Netflix in its infancy. Netflix has sent me 34 broken DVDs, 2 fatally scratched DVDs, 7 wrong DVDs, 0 lost DVDs. That's right, these were the days long before Netflix was ever a streaming service. Before that, they used to send you movies through the mail. The first section of this site is dated from October of 2004, and it mentions initially feeling quite satisfied with the service. DVDs were arriving in the mail in a timely manner about twice a week. This was their standard $20 plan. Little did I realize, this was a bait and switch tactic. Suddenly, movie shipments went from twice to once a week. So I thought I could get better service if I purchased the $40 plan, but even that proved disappointing. The condition of their movies was terrible. Some movies were insanely scratched, many were broken or the wrong title. When I tried to get help or complain, I found it nearly impossible to contact Netflix from their website. I would have appreciated being reimbursed for the scratched, broken, or wrong titles, but that never happened. This article then goes over the frustration of returning your damaged movies, movies becoming lost in transit, the need to inspect all of your movies every single time, and it even points out flaws in Netflix legal disclaimers. Once you go below all this, you'll see that there's actually a considerable section about the experiences of other dissatisfied customers. It appears as if a lot of these people felt seen thanks to this site, and can completely relate to the frustration that this section went over. This poor guy here fell victim to a shady tactic that still persists to this day. He received a 2-month Netflix gift certificate for his birthday, but after the 2 months were up, he was automatically charged and couldn't understand why he wasn't warned about this. This is something people are much more aware of today, but I can imagine it wasn't nearly as common knowledge in 2004. What a joke this company has become. I've been with them for over 3 years and it has never been this bad. I have the 8 out at a time plan and it is a complete waste of money. 1 out of every 3 DVDs I receive is either completely or somewhat damaged. I can usually get somewhat through the movie before it starts skipping. Sometimes they won't play at all. Their customer service is a joke. I am canceling my service after this month and will never go back. Hopefully another company will emerge to take their place. I guess it goes to show you what happens when a company becomes too big. Profits go up, service goes down. Man, if only this person knew how big Netflix was going to become. And really, that's what interests me most about this section. Even from the beginning, some shady seeds were being planted, but the outrage was clearly never enough. Netflix was popular then, but it was just a fraction of what it would become in the future. The bottom of this website mentions the desire for this webpage to be indexed by the search engines so that everybody could see it. Hopefully then, some of these problems could be fixed. At the very bottom of the page, he lists some Netflix alternatives. Green Sign, Blockbuster, Rent Anime, Intelliflix, and Amazon coming soon. Now, this is going to be a good time. This is the evolution of Bowser's sprite. As the headlining villain of the Mario series, Bowser's turned up in plenty of the games, but not always in the best light. Who knew a horned, hulking Demon King would be hard to draw? Because I am nothing if not self-indulgent. I'll be taking a look at all of Bowser's most notable appearances and giving my extremely professional opinion. Below this, he mentions that he's going to grade all these Bowser sprites based on 3 distinct qualities: his expressiveness, his chunkiness, and his Bowserness. As a massive Mario fan, recently I've been even playing Mario Wonder and replaying Odyssey. I cannot wait to see how he grades these. We start off with the original Mario Bros. From 1985. Naturally, Bowser didn't look like himself just yet. Despite this article mentioning how remarkable this all was for 1985, it naturally isn't on the level of future Bowsers. Expressiveness, 1 out of 5. Mouth open, mouth closed, it's still more emoting than any other enemy in the game, but... Chunkiness, 2 out of 5. He's the biggest sprite in the game, but the tile map limitations force him to look strangely elongated. He's big, but not lovably big. Bowserness, 3 out of 5. He's mean looking. In a game full of cuddly looking squids and strolling chestnuts, here's the first foe to look reasonably threatening, conveying as much fang-filled fear as white pixels can muster. The limited detail and expanse of flat green seem uncanny compared to the more textured turtle foes, which is probably a point in itself. He looks off, and every time Nintendo dredge up this sprite, it only serves as a reminder of how much he's changed in the decades since. For the better, of course. I don't know anyone who earnestly loves this sprite, and I don't want to know. You keep that to yourself. Next up is Mario 3, and right at the beginning, this writer says, "What a glow up." Expressiveness, 4 out of 5. He's got expressions, he's got poses, he's got angles. Chunkiness, 4 out of 5. He's a big and satisfyingly large sprite. About as ideal a Bowser you could hope for on the NES. Bowserness, 4 out of 5. That's a Bowser. A bit more acrobatic than we're used to, but Bowser all the same, even if he's still a little ways to go. When Mario eventually took his leap to 3D, Bowser of course had to as well. Super Mario 64 is one of the most iconic Mario games of all time, but it definitely didn't feature the best Bowser design, at least according to this poster. This website compares him to something that belongs at a Thanksgiving Day parade. That's a 1 out of 5 for expressiveness, a 4 out of 5 for chunkiness, and a 3 out of 5 for Bowserness. He may not have been the greatest Bowser, but hey, at least he was chunky. The Bowser that wound up doing the best of them all was actually Super Mario 64 DS. This is still the same Mario 64 we all know and love, but they updated certain things, including Bowser's design, who gets a 5 out of 5 across the entire board. The Bowser in Super Mario Sunshine was the runner-up. However, keep in mind this site isn't exactly up to date, as it seems to end before Mario Galaxy ever even came to be. Still, I thought this was a fascinating read and an amazing idea for a site. This was thoroughly entertaining, and I'm genuinely really happy I found it. For anybody as fascinated by ancient Roman history as me, I might have found the perfect website for you. There's so much allure to the ancient Roman times. For me, I think it can just be so mind-boggling to wrap my head around the fact that over 2,000 years ago, there was a society so large and advanced. It always makes me wonder what everyday life was like for the average person, just like you and me. With history this far back, it's so easy to mythologize and separate it from reality. But these were all real people, with homes, friends, feelings, and struggles. This website helps that fascination of mine because it's simply about what ancient Roman clothing was like. There's a lot of depth here too. It goes over jewelry, common clothing materials, footwear, how hair was styled, sports clothing, and so much more. I of course can't go over all that this website has to offer, but I'm sure you can see how many grounds it really covers. I definitely didn't expect to stumble on a site like this, and that's my favorite thing about Wibby. It always pulls up something you couldn't possibly expect. So, what else can we find? Similarly to our last website, some of my favorite places to visit across the web are history sites. Ever since I was in 8th grade, I have been fascinated by the First World War. I had always been into history, but I mostly dabbled in some World War II battles and presidential facts. But ironically, that first Battlefield 1 trailer changed my life, and I know a lot of you out there are going to agree. The absolute masterpiece of a trailer got me excited for a game centered during the Great War, and I wanted to know more. Over the years, I became obsessed with the larger-than-life figures, the battles, the uniforms, the guns. World War II will always be a more popular subject, but something about World War I really stood out to me, and it's the driving force behind almost all of our historical videos. When I saw a website pop up on Wibby called worldwar1.com, I knew it was a match made in heaven. We've talked extensively about the First World War on this channel, but seeing as it's my favorite era of human history to learn about, I wasn't going to pass up another chance. That's when the website loaded, and the first thing I noticed was how empty the website was, and the title at the top, 1914-1918 Casualty Figures. The website is solely dedicated towards the cataloging of every soldier that died in service. Seeing these numbers that I already knew to be so cold and upfront made me feel really uncomfortable. Of course, it's war, and I know this specific war led to a lot of death and destruction in my years of learning about it, but I've never seen such a blunt representation of the horrors of war. This isn't a war movie with heroes and sacrifices, or even a story of a battle with a winner or loser. This is cold, hard numbers that allows me to see the overall scope of senseless slaughter that occurred in only 4 years of conflict. As much as the website makes me uncomfortable, I think it's incredibly useful. It puts a centuries-old war into more perspective. The older things get, the more mythical properties a time period or event takes on, and this website strips away all of that and presents the war to end all wars in its utter pointless brutality.
Welcome to Zombocom. This is Zombocom.
What in the world is this?
This is Zombocom. Welcome to Zombocom. You can do anything at Zombocom. Anything at all. The only limit is yourself. Welcome.
Okay, so we've used Wibby a few times, but let's take a break for just a minute. Wibby has shown us a number of charming yet forgotten websites, but there was another place that once held millions of websites. That place was GeoCities. A lot of the websites in GeoCities are probably the ones you really think of when you hear that term, the old internet. These were often the sites that had those really charming designs that have gone down in history. GeoCities may not exist anymore, but lucky for us, there is a place called GeoCities Gallery. This place has archives of so many of these old sites and aims to present them in the most authentic way possible. Let's start off by looking in the Area 51 subsection Keep. Why not? I'm sure we'll find something here. This is Psycho's realm, and right off the bat, this is what I was talking about when it comes to that charming design style that so many of these old sites have. Whenever I look at these, I just feel such a strong sense of wonder, as if these designs alone unknowingly express the excitement that the early internet provided to so many people. This site explains that it just recently had to be remade, which I suppose is why it also features the classic under construction placeholder. As far as the actual contents go, here's the first section. Having trouble figuring out those internet abbreviations? Well, click here for help. Whoa, listen to that music. As expected, it's basically a list of all these abbreviations he can think of, as well as a list of keyboard emoticons and what they mean too. This list of symbols and abbreviations that are used millions of times every single day weren't always widespread knowledge, and it's interesting to go back and think about that sometimes. In the About Me section, we can see that the site owner was 19 when creating it, and he also explains the origin of his nickname Psycho. Although my name is Chris, it has been determined that there are too many people on this earth that have that name. So it was either kill every single one of them or just refer to myself as Psycho so as to eliminate any confusion as to which Chris is which. In all seriousness, Psycho is my nickname. One might wonder, how does someone get a nickname like that? It's pretty easy. Climb a stop sign and start randomly shouting, "You cannot pass," and people will start looking at you funny. Or hang a strobe light out on the 6th floor of a dorm just to see if it will distract the people who occupy the room below you. Or, well, just be yourself and have fun with life, because if you don't, you will die. Honestly, actually, that doesn't matter. You are going to die eventually anyway, so learn to live it up a little. The very bottom mentions his journal that he updates often. If you click on this link, you are redirected to his live journal, another place that was used extensively during the earlier days of the internet. As we can see, the last live journal entry was all the way back in 2003, which is the year I was born. Most of these entries here seem to be humorous stories and totally random tidbits, things like, which pre-1985 video game character are you, or what font are you? Once again, there isn't a ton here in the way of content, but the casualness of it all is what makes it stick out to me. It arguably makes a site like this one feel like even more of a time capsule than the others. Speaking of time capsules, just check this out. If there's one thing that was common during the older days of the internet, it was fan sites like this. This one, as we can see, is all about Tobey Maguire. This is something else. This site has such an unmistakably Y2K aesthetic through it all, with a wealth of sections all about different aspects of Tobey Maguire. His biography page has an extremely lengthy write-up, but at the top of it says, "Just so you know, I didn't write that biography, I took it from another webpage. I don't remember the link though. I'm too damn lazy to write one myself." One of the other sections was his filmography, and as we can see, his most recent movie was none other than Spider-Man, which actually wasn't even out yet at the time that this site was written. In the links section, we can see a number of sites that this author got their information from, as well as a number of other sites the author just happens to be interested in. Surprisingly, most of these links actually still work, which can allow us to peer into what it was like to be a super fan of Tobey Maguire, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dawson's Creek, and more. One of the Dawson's Creek pages linked was actually an Angel Fire site, which was another hugely popular website creator at this time that we haven't gotten to talk about yet. Thankfully, Angel Fire still exists today, which allows a site like this one to live on. Are these sites totally ridiculous and even cringy? Absolutely. But that's kind of the beauty of it. That's just the way it was when you were obsessed with TV shows or movies, at least for a lot of people, especially during a time where it was harder to find people in real life that shared these interests. I'm sure many of you can relate to once being that crazy passionate fan of TV shows, movies, or even people. And hey, if you're still doing that today, I'm definitely not judging. I like taking solace in the fact that even 25 to 30 years ago, things were pretty much no different. With my interests, I also resorted to the internet and wound up making so many YouTube videos about Rayman, Family Guy, and Gravity Falls, to name a few. But before that, people just like me were doing these same things with websites. These sites unknowingly do such a good job at taking you back to a more carefree time, where nothing mattered except your favorite celebrity and dedicating entire web pages for them. Let's look for one more site, perhaps something a little more action-packed. The Enchanted Forest subsection definitely called out to me, and I wanted to see what I could find in there. What I found was this, The Nightmare. As we can hear, it has music. That music, as well as the design of this place, is just filled with so much personality. I love all these primitive animations here. The first section, Gargoyles, mentioned a gargoyle named Gargi who was adopted on August 25th from an Adopt-A-Haunt program. Unfortunately, that Adopt-A-Haunt link is no longer active, so I was left wondering what that was. It seems as if these sections are, for the most part, totally disconnected from each other. The only thing they really share in common is a general horror theme. The graveyard section is very bare bones, and seems to be mostly about the art and animations on display. The Charlie Brown section is also pretty similar. Legends of the Zodiac is different, however, as it has much less animations and much more text, just being write-ups about each zodiac sign. Something I was really interested to see was the awards section. I really like the idea of internet awards, and I get saddened sometimes that they're not really a thing anymore. Of course, these weren't official awards or anything, there weren't any prizes or anything really, but I always found this stuff heartwarming, and it added a lot to the community aspect of the old internet. It's just kinda wholesome that website owners would give other websites awards for various reasons. The websites that gave these awards are not up anymore except for one. Clicking the Happy Halloween award actually sends you to an Angel Fire site, Janet's Place. This is just a personal website, and I have no idea when it was last touched. The banner on the front says that it could have been almost 2 years, but that could have been written much longer ago than that. Under the links section, there's a bunch of other Halloween sites. A few of these are still open too, which adds to that sense of exploration that the old internet was so full of. I have to give a special shout out to this All Hallows Eve website because just listen to this music. Nowadays, websites like these have been mostly replaced by social medias for better or for worse. Passionate posts about interests, movies, or your personal life haven't gone anywhere, but they're now found most often on places like Instagram, Twitter, or Tumblr instead of personalized websites. A lot of these websites from the beginning of the millennium were created as an outlet, a hope that if you created something special about one of your interests, maybe you could find somebody else on the far reaches of the internet that felt the same way. Today it's much easier to find those people, which I think is something that can be taken for granted sometimes. But at the same time, social media requires us to play by their rules, to create things based on their layout, their guidelines, and their gimmicks. It's not the same type of freedom that allowed these old websites to feel so exciting. As a result, even though the internet is so much larger than it was then, it just feels smaller sometimes, doesn't it? I never really got to experience the old internet, yet I still have so much nostalgia for it somehow. I feel like I missed out on something so beautiful that will never be replicated again. Though I will never be able to have been there, I'm grateful that there are still ways to view what once was. The majority of these old websites have otherwise been effectively lost to time. With the rise of search engine optimization, it can be nearly impossible to find anything like these in the wild. These sites weren't made to get as many clicks as possible. They were made to express passions and interests. They weren't made to be monetized or marketed, so they were buried. But let's not let the spirit of it all die too. If any of the websites shown throughout this video impacted you, I would love to hear about it. This journey throughout internet time and space was nothing if not human. We saw websites from obsessive fans, websites from an older hobbyist, whatever the hell Zombo.com was, and so much more. Exploring the old internet truly was all about the journey. What you were subjected to was never what you'd expect, because after all, humans are nothing if not unpredictable. With every passing day, we stray further from these forgotten websites, but maybe they can live on after all, whether it's through archives or the spirit that they stood for. These forgotten websites can be remembered once again. Recently, both Jiff and I turned 22, and the channel itself turned 7 years old, and it had us all nostalgic. The older we get, the more we reflect on the things that directly or indirectly inspired all of our interests. I think it's the same for all you guys watching too. The main demographic for our channel is people the same age as us, and it's interesting to see all of your comments whenever we tackle nostalgic subjects. Today we want to grab the lowest hanging fruit of all when it comes to nostalgia for people our age: Flash games. In our old internet series, we explore the allure of things we were too young to experience. But for this video, I want to kick back and talk about my personal experiences with the internet that is old now, which blows my mind.
Boom, 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 boom.
Of course, we aren't the first channel to discuss and reminisce about old Flash games, but I just want this to be a chiller video than usual, so let's just get right into it. I know a lot of you guys will recognize most of these, but hopefully I'm able to bring some new talking points to the table. Without further ado, let's check out some old Flash games together. Alright, where do I even start with something like this? I jumped around so many Flash sites as a kid, whether it was free time in school, at home, or blatantly ignoring my schoolwork and sneaking a quick game while the teacher wasn't looking. I know damn well a shared experience for all of us is trying to sneak in a game and thinking you're slick until you feel the teacher's hand on your shoulder and immediately are asked to shut down your computer. I've played survival horror a ton, and nothing ever will top getting caught on cool math games when you're supposed to be writing a book report on mice and men. I think cool math games might actually be the perfect place to start for a video like this. It might be the most obvious answer, but in a video all about my personal experiences, cool math deserves a nice section dedicated to it. Cool Math Games was the iconic spot for pretty much every kid in school. The website was never blocked and had the easiest games to pick up and play for a couple of minutes. I'm pretty sure most of you guys know what I mean when I say it was never blocked, but for those who did not go through that struggle, here's a quick explanation since I will be mentioning this throughout the video. School Wi-Fi would have tons of restrictions on it and blocked plenty of websites, some that deserved it and some that just felt strange. Of course, most of the gaming websites were blocked, save for a few notable ones like Cool Math. Kids would make new websites that house Flash games to attempt to get around these issues, and they would always wind up getting blocked anyways. Thankfully, Cool Math Games was always around. Some of these games that I sunk hours into were things like Snake and of course the Run series of games, but the ones I really never saw anybody playing were things like Lemonade Stand and Johnny Upgrade. Lemonade Stand was such a fun way to experience something we all wanted as kids, a functioning lemonade stand, make money, buy products, and attempt to become richer for the next playthrough. Anybody who played this definitely remembers marking up the prices as high as possible just to see how you would do. Johnny Upgrade was another math-centric game, which is hilarious because math was and still is the bane of my existence. Johnny Upgrade was so cool, it was basically a speedrun challenge. You have to upgrade Johnny and memorize the singular level to finally complete the game. It was so fun contemplating on if I wanted more firepower or more time and using your resources in the most strategic way possible. Games like Block Swords genuinely affected me mentally, and I think any anger problems I have stem from that game. I remember playing tons of chess on Cool Math games as well, give a kid bright, colorful, fast-paced games, and I guess me being lame, I still might pick chess on occasion. Of course, the iconic Papa's Aria games were massive headliners for the site. There's way too many of them to count, but the ones I remember playing the most were the Pizzeria and Wingeria variants. Definitely make sure to let me know which one of these was your favorites in the comments. Cool Math Games was the benchmark for Flash games for me and my friends as kids, but it was far from the only site we spent our time on. The craziest thing about Cool Math is the fact that it's still completely operational. It still looks and plays all the same games the same way it did all those years ago. If you haven't been there in ages, open up Pandora's nostalgic box and get back to your pizzeria. There's just so many sites to choose from. I think my best course of action is another extremely popular site, one that had more than just Flash games. One that probably deserves its own entire video. A site I visited every day for years. Any guesses? I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to think. Yeah, come on, it had to be Lego.com. This site, of course, is ripe with nostalgia, and of course, like I mentioned, did not only have games. It had sets you could purchase, character bios, alternative builds, and all sorts of activities. I feel like this site stands alone usually when talking about Flash games, but I'd be remiss not to mention Lego.com, as it was genuinely the site I think I spent the most time on. From the years of 2008 to around 2012, I visited Lego.com daily. Between those years, I played tons of games. The first one that comes to mind is the LEGO Indiana Jones Adventures. LEGO Indiana Jones was one of the best themes, and its recent return was nothing short of glorious. Our first introduction to LEGO Indiana Jones gave us a fantastic action-adventure side-scroller, sliding under spiders and leaping over spikes while running from the boulder. The one thing I remember about this game was just how tight the controls were. It had a fantastic interface as well and scratched the Indiana Jones adventure itch before I had even gotten the full LEGO game for the Wii. The next game I remember playing over and over again was Power Miners Lava Showdown. Power Miners is in my top 3 favorite LEGO themes of all time, and the lava-themed second wave still has some of my favorite LEGO designs, period. The game is simple, at least it looks that way as an adult, but as a kid I never knew what was going on. It sort of looks like Pac-Man where you have to imprison all the rock monsters, but for some reason as a child this one broke my brain. Despite that, I played it all the time and just enjoyed being enveloped by the Power Miners atmosphere. What would a section all about LEGO.com be without mentioning LEGO Star Wars? And my LEGO Star Wars nostalgia is the best nostalgia because mine is the Clone Wars. Now technically the LEGO Clone Wars game I played over and over was not a Flash game, but I think we can all make an exception because the game, The Search for R2-D2, was just plain awesome. Like I said, this wasn't actually a Flash game, it ran in the Unity engine, and it was my first real experience learning that computers could play games similar to what I played on my consoles. In this game, you had awesome sprawling levels with 4 characters to choose from. I remember not getting very far, but even the tutorial world was awesome, battling along as Anakin Skywalker in a Separatist cruiser. LEGO.com really hit the nail on the head when it comes to brand synergy. You'd have your LEGO sets, LEGO Star Wars sheets, LEGO Castle shirt, while playing some LEGO Space Police Flash games. I wish we could spend more time here, but there's of course plenty more Flash games we want to get to. I am a huge LEGO fan, and I know there's tons of you out there as well. If you want an entire video dedicated to LEGO.com nostalgia, let me know in the comments.
Hoist the flag.
There was one more site that ruled my youth before we move on to talking about some of the random games we found scattered across the internet. That site, of course, being miniclip.com. Miniclip was my personal favorite Flash game site. It had it all. Side scrollers, action shooters, strategy, you name it, Miniclip had it. I vividly remember my cousin showing me Miniclip and it blew my mind. My possible first gaming addiction ever had to be Raft Wars. In this game, you and your baby brother are harassed by Vikings, pirates, gangsters, and your next door neighbors at the beach. There's only one way to enjoy your chill day off at the beach, and that's to have a raft war. Shooting your water gun cannon blindly, hoping to knock enemies off their raft and declare final victory. I poured hours into this game as a kid and just felt that the combat was so satisfying. I took a break while writing this segment just to go and play the game again, and man, it is still so satisfying and fun. It's incredible how the old saying, less is more, rings true for decades-old Flash games. I vividly remember seeing advertisements for South Park and thinking it was an animated Raft Wars show. It definitely wasn't a coincidence that the characters in the game look similar, I'm sure. My dad had to assure me that South Park was definitely not a kid-friendly show about the adventures of Raft Wars. One of my other true loves as a child had to be Icebreaker. Icebreaker was a physics puzzle game where you had to cut down frozen Vikings in large blocks of ice and escort them to their ships. I just remember adoring the physics of this game and how fun it was to cut the ice. I guess you're starting to notice a trend in my favorite games all being very satisfying and physics-based. Icebreaker was no joke either, it became a pretty cutthroat puzzle game in the later stages. This is one that I'll come back to every couple of months. If I recall correctly, it was the first game I ever played on Miniclip, and from there my fate was sealed. I played tons of one-off games, but to round out my Miniclip holy trinity, the last game I want to talk about that Miniclip hosted is Commando Assault. This game, for lack of a better term, was metal as fuck. Yeah, it's that serious. This game was a side-scrolling shooter where you had to churn out troops and tanks from your side to overpower the enemy's tanks and troops on their side. I just remember this game feeling so realistic. One of my favorite things in shooter games is commanding an army. I always remember those levels of Halo where you had ODST or Marines at your side, and Commando Assault gave that vibe of an entire army fighting for dominance. The game has incredible graphics. It looks like an upgraded version of Contra you'd see on the Sega Genesis. The game nails that breakneck speed you want from a Contra-style shoot-'em-up too. This game also gave me tons of issues as a kid. This was not for the faint of heart. I can't remember if I did ever beat the game, but it's definitely possible. I definitely sunk countless hours into it. This might have actually been my first real violent shooter game too. Enemies explode in a glorious gory pile and vehicles scatter the landscape with shrapnel. Shooter games are still my one and only, and I think Star Wars definitely gave me my first lust for guns and guts, but Commando Assault truly cemented that feeling in my underdeveloped 7-year-old brain. Miniclip to me was the benchmark. It was always banned at school, but it was something I looked forward to when I got home. Miniclip unfortunately suffered a different fate to Cool Math. The website we knew is gone and only hosts a few multiplayer games like Pool and Cards. All the games I mentioned are still very much playable, but that beautiful interface I loved is gone. That's definitely going to do it in terms of talking about specific websites. I played games on so many sites, but when I think of nostalgic Flash games, my mind goes straight to Cool Math, Lego, or Miniclip. We aren't done just yet, there's a bunch of games that I played scattered across the internet. So let's get into my nostalgic bargain bin of Flash games. The first random game I want to talk about is something I don't really think was too popular, Haunt the House. This game was awesome. You play as a silly specter in a house you've long since died in, and now some rude millionaire is now throwing an extravagant party there. The gameplay is really fun. You take control of the ghosts and you have to possess a multitude of different things in the house in an attempt to spook all the guests out. There's a sanity meter, but not for you. You have to balance the terror across the house. The goal is to kick out all 30 guests, but you don't want them to be too terrified they'll jump out the window. This was a fantastic game I always played during my computer class in school. It was never on any of the big Flash sites. I think I played it on some weird local Australian kids site. The game is still very much playable, and the freedom it gives you to mess around with the attendees of the party is so awesome. There's plenty of ways to spook, scare, and terrify, but be careful. You want to make sure they're just scared enough. Now, I don't want to seem like a pretentious Flash game enthusiast here, but the next two games up on this list were also something I never saw anybody play in school. Those two being the Warfare games, Warfare 19 and Warfare 1944. Both of these games had the same gameplay, so I'm lumping them together here. As the titles of the game show, these take place in World War I and World War II respectively. These are side-scrolling strategy games where you take command of an army and attempt to send soldiers over trenches to attempt to take your enemy's land. Personally, I'm a huge World War history buff, and finding these games in middle school seemed like a dream come true. They were never blocked, so I was always able to take part in taking enemy trenches and declaring victory. There were tons of different soldiers you could send out on the battlefield, riflemen, assault troops, snipers. You could also utilize more impressive weapons like armored cars and tanks, as well as heavy artillery, and my personal favorite, mustard gas. Don't call me a war criminal, just play the game, dropping mustard gas on an enemy trench and watching every enemy soldier fall so your boys could advance is sickeningly satisfying. This game was endlessly replayable too. You had campaigns for British and Germans in 1917, and Americans and Germans in 1944. When I couldn't play Battlefield 1 because I was stuck at school, this was my immediate alternative, and even so at home I snuck in a few rounds of this game. If you like military history games and think you have the strategic brilliance in order to win the war, give it a try. This next game admittedly was a very late edition. The script was finished, the audio was recorded, and Jiff was about to begin editing until I remembered one game so good it woke me up in a cold sweat. Like Ahab himself, I was reminded of the great white whale, Moby Dick. This game flipped the script. Instead of hunting the pale monster, you are the monster. You play as Moby Dick and terrorize anyone who attempts to enter your ocean dominion. It's a long, drawn-out game where the longer you survive, the bigger you get. The game is also extremely challenging. In the later stages, you only find massive ships waiting to harpoon you at the surface. A little detail I loved about this was the amount of damage you took and how it was shown on the whale's body. I just thought the scars were so cool. Now, this is a game I come back to often, and call me Ishmael, I can't believe I just forgot all about it for this video. Just be careful playing this game, lest ye be willing to be haunted by the white whale. I got my personal deep cuts out of the way, so I want to give a quick shout out to possibly the most famous Flash game of them all, the Impossible Quiz. This quiz truly seemed impossible, and this was one of those games every kid tried to beat. The quiz was basically one big joke and would reference different memes, internet references, and even itself at times. The game's art style was standout as well. It was particularly ugly and looked very old school internet even then. It felt somewhat ancient, and its title including the word impossible made us feel all the more determined. It's hard to explain why we were so drawn to the impossible quiz. The impossibility factor definitely plays a big role. You only have 3 strikes for getting questions wrong, and after playing over and over, you begin to notice that it's basically a speedrunning simulator. I remember I got pretty far in this as a kid, but I was never able to actually beat it. I knew plenty of kids that did though. This game was constantly blocked, but it was so popular that we never really had any trouble finding it. I remember a time in 8th grade where I was in the library after school trying to beat this, and I just never did. Maybe one day I'll stream it and make the impossible quiz possible after all these years. There's one final game I'd like to talk about in this video. It kinda stands on its own because it wasn't super popular, but I also knew a bunch of kids that played it. That game was Plasma Burst 2. Plasma Burst was a kick-ass side-scrolling shooter with really cool physics built in. You jumped and shot throughout levels with different customization and weapons. It felt like a Flash game version of Halo, and even though I was in middle school from 2014 to 2017 when Halo was not what it used to be, a Flash version of Halo was still something that blew our minds. I pumped hours upon hours into this game, and yet I never beat this one either. I remember having more fun playing around with the actual physics of the game than the actual gameplay itself. It was so satisfying to blast enemies into squibs, and you could even fight your friends. This game had an awesome multiplayer. Granted, I'm not too sure how in-depth it was at the height of its popularity, but I still played this with my friends on plenty of occasions. My friends and I even had access to a free multiplayer-only version of Halo Combat Evolved that we used to get the entire class involved in. But oftentimes we just hang out on Plasma Burst, which is such a testament to how cool this game actually was. I'm curious how many of you have memories of Plasma Burst, because like I mentioned, it was such a strange mix of popular and underrated, at least at my school. Flash games were truly something special. The nostalgia I, and I'm sure all of you have, will be something we never forget. These games that seem to be just things to pass the time or slack off from school now remind us of simpler times. These games were well constructed and had so much love and attention poured in, and even though most of us were children playing these, we could tell just how much love they had baked into them. It was such a sprawling Wild West of games, and that exploration is something I don't think we'll ever see again. I know some of you are probably screaming at your screen that I'm ending the video without talking about your favorite Flash games, but this is a topic I'd love to revisit. I left out so many classics. I was never a big fan of the Stickman style games, but I know those were extremely popular. Sites like Addicting Games and Newgrounds I used on occasion, but they were never my go-tos, and I wanted this video to be a bit more personal than usual. You may now think that my personal favorite picks are terrible or perfect, and that's exactly what I want you guys to use this comment section for. Gush about your memories and favorites that you haven't thought about in years, or games that you still play every day. If this does well enough and it's something you guys want to see more of, definitely comment down below and maybe your pick will be included in the next video. Let's get high off that Flash game nostalgia together. A long time ago, the internet used to feel like a Wild West. A place where you could discover anything and anybody. Back when the internet was a new technology, there was a ton of excitement towards it. It felt like entering a whole new world. People were so excited to explore and carve out their place in a whole new digital reality. As a result, websites were made. During the old internet, long before it became corporatized and monopolized, Websites were mainly a place for hobbyists to design and create something dedicated to themselves or something they were passionate about. When you visit these sites today, they stand in such a stark contrast to what the internet has become. They felt optimistic, full of heart, and most importantly, they felt human. These websites weren't made for monetization. Many of them revolved around unique, niche topics from people who cared about them. It felt as if you could discover and learn about people and subjects from such different walks of life. But sometimes, that was not for the best. With the internet feeling so much freer and open, and with the ability to discover people from so many different places, sometimes that meant that deplorable things slipped through the cracks. You could be exploring a website all about the Philips CDI and then suddenly find yourself here. cutoffmyfeet.com, a name that is sure to get any random visitor terrified yet intrigued. This website first appeared during the year 2000. Prepare yourself for an adventure like you have never before experienced. In an unprecedented event, live via webcam access, you can watch me amputate my legs with a homemade guillotine on September 19th. Yes, you read that correctly. Now you may be wondering what kind of demented website you have found. People read the words amputate and guillotine and automatically freak. What I am doing may be a little untraditional, but that doesn't mean that this is some kind of freak show. I just want to run again. This incredibly alarming homepage alludes to a sort of tragedy behind this all, especially with the I just want to run again line. Perhaps the section about Freck and the accident can fill in the blanks. The About Freck section is pretty small, but states that Freck, whose real name is Paul, was 33 at this time. It says that his hobbies once included playing basketball, water sports, fishing, kneeboarding, and skiing. It appeared to have included a few videos of Paul talking about college and the ROTC, but I couldn't view them. In the accident section, it finally described his traumatic incident, an accident while he and his friends were out boating. This accident partially severed the T12 in Paul's spinal cord, resulting in partial paralysis from the waist down, including complete paralysis of his feet. He cannot feel or move anything below his ankles. Paul spent 3 months in and out of hospitals, including several back surgeries and a kidney being removed. This section states that Paul's lifestyle changed dramatically after the incident, but he has regained limited walking ability with the help of his leg braces. This took what off the surface was a pretty disturbing website into something really heartbreaking. In the ideas section, it states that Paul desperately wants to live a normal life again. When the accident first happened, the technology was not available for that to happen. While the technology is now available for Paul to lead a better life, the financial burden would be much more than he can afford. Since Paul is on Medicare/Medicaid, his insurance will not cover the amputation and new prosthetics because it is not deemed a necessary procedure. Paul also receives medical disability, and his Medicare plan does not even cover the cost of his catheter bag. Paul doesn't want to fight a no-win battle with the insurance and medical communities in the United States. Paul is using this event as a chance to speak out against the lack of care in the medical field and the insurance industry. He strongly believes that this could make great strides in the much-needed insurance and medical reform in the United States. This amputation is simply Paul's way of saying that even though corporate America has refused him, he will get his new prosthetics and improve his quality of life. This website leaves you with a lot to think about and a lot of questions. It clearly made a huge impact on those who suddenly stumbled upon it, and before long, it became a major news story. I found multiple articles from a bunch of different outlets. This ABC article from 2001 says that the site was attracting over 10,000 visitors a day. Despite that, only 10 people have donated $20 for the operation. However, Morgan believes this would change with the construction of his guillotine. This article shows us that he did not remove his limbs in 2000, but a new date was given, Halloween of 2001. A different article from November of 2001 stated that Freck would cut off his feet live on the internet on January 5th, 2001. The article states that if you donate $20, you can watch Freck build his guillotine. Then, on the big day itself, there will be an hour-long professionally produced web extravaganza, complete with prepackaged interviews, online polling, and of course, the big event. Freck will sever his feet at the ankle. He has no feeling from the ankles down, bleed for a while, and cauterize the wounds. The article itself even brings up the fact that the big day had been delayed twice by this point. In a late archive of the website from 2003, we can see that things have changed a little. On the home screen, we can now see Freck and his guillotine. The bottom of this home screen then addresses the fact that his feet still weren't amputated yet. He says that in good news, he secured a production crew, EMT services, lighting, camera crews, director, live band, the video and DVD production, lighting, location, production manager, and the guillotine. In bad news, he says that corporate lawyers made him lose a lot of his crew, the satellite truck, and the investors who were going to cover the production costs of the event. As a result, he says that the amputation is postponed until the money has been secured. Many of you may wonder why I'm not using the sign-up money to pay for the costs. The money paid for memberships is in escrow until after I perform the amputation, so I am hoping to find an interested investor to help me get this amputation underway. In the frequently asked questions section, there were a number of interesting questions asked. One of these was, what are you going to do with your feet after you cut them off? Would you consider an auction? I'm not sure if that's legal. Ultimately, it seems that Freck was planning to freeze his legs with the hope that maybe someday he'd be able to use them again. The next question asked what he was planning to do for pain management during the operation. He says he hopes that a doctor on site can administer some local anesthetic in each leg to cover the initial pain. Then, he says, later in the hospital, further pain treatment will be administered if needed. Towards the bottom, he's asked how many people he thinks will watch the live stream. He hopes it would be 200,000. As time went by, this website began fading. A place that once hosted thousands of visitors a day started becoming forgotten. By the mid-2000s, the website was no more. I found forums asking if anyone remembered cutoffmyfeet.com. Most of these threads ended up devolving into amputation jokes, but no one seemed to know what came of this site. In fact, there doesn't seem to be anything I could find about Paul online after this website disappeared. Which leaves the question, what happened to him? Did he ever really cut off his feet on livestream with somebody watching it in person? It seems pretty clear that he did not. He very publicly mentioned the various setbacks this entire operation was giving him. That is, if you believed he ever even would have at all. I can only assume that he just decided to shut down the website one day after realizing that it wasn't going to help with his medical costs. The thought that somebody felt he had no other choice but to amputate his own legs in front of an audience is profoundly sad and horrifying at the same time. The website reminded me of a primitive, unsettling GoFundMe page from long before GoFundMe ever existed. For a brief time, he truly got the attention he hoped for, but it looks like he never got the financial support. If he did get the support he had hoped for, who knows where this could have gone, and if he would have really done it. Instead, this site will forever remain as one of the most infamous tales the old internet has to offer. At this time, the web was often described as feeling like an escape of sorts. It was a whole new world that felt vast, yet oddly intimate. Sometimes the most alluring part of exploring the old internet was seeing how unknown some of the websites appeared to be. Exploring these websites full of passion, personality, and occasionally horror led to the internet feeling so vast and full of possibilities. That leads us directly to the next website of the night. First arriving in 1997 is superbad.com. When visiting the website, the first thing you are greeted with is this unintelligible image. When clicking it, we then see what looks like retro macOS, and I'm sure some of these buttons will be clickable. Soon, the unnerving nature of this website begins to reveal itself. This website appears absolutely endless. Every single page seems to lead to hundreds of other pages, which themselves leads to hundreds of more. It is an absolutely overwhelming labyrinth. To this day, nobody really knows what it means. What some people have realized is that some of these pages seem to repeatedly mention certain people or characters. Mr. Hubris, Aunt Viv, Uncle Jay, and a surprising amount of references to bees. The art style within all of these different web pages is extremely varied and distinct. This website first appeared in 1997, and some of these visuals were shockingly detailed and advanced for the time. I'm sure that this combination of aesthetics and the cryptic nature of its design must have unsettled people. Nowadays, you might recognize a website like this as an ARG. Superbad.com looks like it must be some sort of cryptic puzzle to solve. Many ARGs today feature these sort of complex, unsettling, abstract puzzles. It's also an early example of web art, that is, artistic work specifically produced using the tools of web design. Back in 1997, something like this would have been completely unheard of. It likely left many visitors confused, fascinated, and unsettled. A website like this, as off-putting and creepy as it may have seemed off the surface, was revolutionary in a way, and eventually it began getting recognized for its feats. In 1999, it received a Webby Award in the Weird category. In 2000, it was actually displayed at the Whitney Museum Biennial along with 9 other websites. This website was created by a man named Ben Benjamin, and when asked about his website's inclusion in the Biennial and whether it validates net art, he said, "I say that it's already valid. What I think it does, it makes it look more valid to the art crowd. So all of a sudden, because it's in a museum, it's not crap anymore?" During the same interview, it further peers behind the creator of Superbad.com. Ben states that he never really thought of his website as art until the art people started finding it. Ben says that he always wanted to be an artist, but didn't think it was practical. It stated that he worked as a web designer at the time this article was written. The article says that Superbad first began as an experimental staging ground, a testing ground of sorts, but eventually it evolved into a maze, which the article says changes almost daily. It's also said that despite the website attracting 2,500 to 3,000 visitors a day in 4 years, it hasn't made a cent. I would love it if somebody wanted to pay me to do something like Superbad, but I've never thought of it as an option. I can't commodify Superbad, it'll never be bought or sold. All these years later, his sentiment seems to have remained true, as the website is still up for you to explore and attempt to uncover. Superbad.com was once an innovator, but even today it remains a fascinatingly mysterious art project that feels just as alluring as it did all those years ago. From the earliest days of the internet, people have used it as a place to document your thoughts. As a result, many old websites were personal blogs. There were also many websites that hosted blogs. When creating one, it was the poster's choice on whether to make them either as revealing or as secretive as they wanted it to be. On the surface, this website seems pretty standard. Fifth Nail was a blog hosted by Blogspot. At this time, it wasn't uncommon to stumble on blogs like these. From behind a screen, you could get a sense of the life and psychology behind someone so far from your own. These early posts consistently mention his cat and also consistently mention a game this guy loved playing called Delta Force. However, just a day later, on January 5th, there was a giant alarming blog entry posted. It begins by stating that he has dedicated a lot of research towards studying sex offenders. In his words, he has researched why they do what they do, but more importantly, what it is that they do. He likens treating these people to treating drug addicts. He then says, "We instead berate the offender with how wrong and even monstrous their thinking is without giving them credit for having an honest, rational thought. Instead of denying the truth and telling the offender they should do the same, if we want to help the victims, we have to help the offenders and recognize that they are victims too. They are victims of their own distorted views. In order to help the offenders, we have to recognize that the thinking that keeps them from seeing the hurt they have caused is the same as the thinking that keeps us from seeing the rational behind their often denied belief that they really did not hurt anyone." Then he feels he needs to state a few things before continuing, namely that he is not actually a child predator, before stating that he was 16 when he committed his crime. He says that because of his family circumstances, he thought that what he did was normal and that everybody did it. Then he says that he spent 2 years in an experimental treatment program that has since been dismantled because of extreme failures. Failures that include people reoffending while still in the program, as well as more than one therapist offending while working with the patients. Due to numerous civil rights violations, this program, which was supposedly at Western State Hospital, was shut down. Finally, the blogger gets into what he sees as the moral of the story. The offenders in the program became disillusioned as they were instructed to use modified versions of the truth that would stand public scrutiny. While emphasizing truth and honesty, the therapists began instructing the senior members in the program to refrain from certain terminology and treatment techniques that might be considered offensive. How sadly often that story is repeated in this world. I think it should be an underlying theme for the Fifth Nail website, how great ideas are invariably trampled by the masses. Unfortunately for us, the posts get way worse from here. In his next post, he states that he went to adult jail when he was 17 and did not get out until he was 38, just a few years ago. In another post a few days later, he states that he has a camera mounted in his home to watch his cats and for security. Ever since my skeletons were front page news 3 years ago, I felt not just a little insecure. I have it rigged so when it detects a significant amount of motion, like someone walking into my living room, it will page my cell phone and take pictures. I can also access my webcam anytime I want from my cell phone to get a live, full-color picture of inside my apartment. This is also part of my paranoia about getting charged for some crime I know nothing about. I figure the more I document my day-to-day routine, the less chance someone has of saying I was someplace I wasn't. But it still doesn't give me any real sense of security because a crafty prosecutor can tear apart the best alibi. Those who may have stumbled upon this blog in the early 2000s must have been horrified. It starts by vaguely mentioning his skeletons that were front page news 3 years ago and seems extremely paranoid about getting charged for some crime he knows nothing about. Most of the following blog posts were once again about the dehumanization that sex offenders face and his frustration with how dishonestly criminals are treated in America. There was also a post about a neighbor of his who invited him for a movie and seemed to have feelings for him. On January 11th, the blogger heard a knock on his door. A man's voice answered, "Police," or something similar. I opened the door thinking it was an officer doing their annual harassment check. Instead, I found 3 officers in the hall, 2 men, 1 woman. One of the men addressed me and accusationally told me that I had better stop harassing women downtown because they know about me and I was being watched. He denies these claims the officers made before saying this at the end of the paragraph. I strongly believe that if the women had accused me of anything more serious than asking them out, I would have been arrested without question. This blog has a lot of posts, and the rest of them seem to follow the themes of what we have seen. Lengthy paragraphs about the psychology of sex offenders and the unfair way in which they are treated, paranoia about the police showing up to his door, and lengthy accounts about prison life. Of course, these posts would also include huge accounts of the poster defensively stating that he was just a confused kid who got locked up for much longer than he should have due to the hysteria, even though all his psych reports said he was low risk. As time went on, these posts began getting more and more unhinged. By the beginning of 2005, the posts looked like this. Are the police spying on me? My laptop has been acting strange lately. Seems I keep getting reinfected with spyware-type viruses. I finally found the hole and plugged it, but now today I get a rejection notice in my email box for an email I never sent. The rejecting server is located in the same city I was being investigated out of this summer. In April of 2005, the most horrifying post yet would be posted. He says that he's been accused of abusing a little boy. Once again though, he says he couldn't possibly do it because after all, he is not a child predator. Well, I'm not a psychopath either. I feel the full force and pain of everyone I've ever hurt, but that doesn't stop me from doing what I need to do. Ultimately, my feelings don't matter. I learned that in prison. I have to carry out my orders or a lot worse than just me dying could happen. The very next post was a bit over a week later on April 25th, and it was just as horrifying. Yes, I am still alive. I honestly wish not. I just don't know how to kill myself, so it makes sense. Nothing makes sense to me right now. Last night I realized I was scared and alone. Being scared doesn't bother me as much as being alone, but it is a fate that I probably choose sometime before I was ever born, because I've been making the decision to fight my battles alone since I was a small child. The current battle is of epic proportions. I do not make this claim idly either. It is a battle between me and my demons. Only 2 people in the world have a clue as to the power and nature of my demons, besides me, and they will probably never read this. But just the same, these demons are stronger than even I gave them credit for, and now they are taking my best blows and not even staggering. I'm afraid. Very afraid. If they win, then a lot of people will be badly hurt. And they've had their way before, so I know what they can do. I've been praying a lot and asking God for help. I've asked him to step in and intercede directly because I see no other way at this point that I can win. If you are reading this and you believe in God, please pray for God to help me defeat my demons. God has shown me the right choice, but my demons have tied to a spit and the fire has already been lit. I don't know if the right choice is even an option anymore. On May 11th, 2005, he would return, stating that the demons have taken over and that he was very afraid. I was in prison for over 18 years since the age of 17. As an adult, all I knew was the oppression of incarceration. All those years I dreamed of getting out and getting even. Instead I got out, and I got even, but did not get caught. So I got even again and again and did not get caught. So I figured, well, I got even twice, actually more, but that's neither here nor there. Even if I'm the only one who knows. So now what? Well, that was when the Happy Joe dream started. I met a bunch of really great people, the kind of people I didn't even know existed, but here they were, bunches of them. My neighbors, my landlords, my professors, my coworkers, and they were all good people who were willing to give me a chance despite my past. They were willing to accept me and be my friend, something that was new for me, having been betrayed by so many friends and even my own family. So I tried to make it work, but the problem was those demons, the ones who got even for me. They kept reminding me that if my new friends knew about them and what I had done to even, then so much for their friendship. So Happy Joe was just dreaming, or pretending to be happy. Then, on May 13th, he would post for the final time. My mother is crying right now because her son is in trouble again. She tried to raise a good son, and she knows her son has a good heart, so why does he do these things? She's probably more hurt and confused than me. Does it matter? It hurts me to know these things. But does it matter? 100 years from now, all my mother's pain will be forgotten, and other mothers will cry for their sons. 1,000,000 years from now, there probably won't be any mothers, at least not like we know. I have feelings. In fact, I think I must be more sensitive than most people because I seem to feel more than they do. At least, more than what they are willing to openly express. I feel for the starving children and families in the world. Others say, oh, that's too bad, but I can't do anything, so... I wish I could be more honest about my feelings, but those demons made sure I'd never be able to do that. I might not know if it matters, but just in case, I am working on an encrypted journal that is hundreds of times more frank than this blog could ever be. That's why I keep it encrypted. I figure in 30 years or more we will have the technology to easily crack the encryption, currently very uncrackable, PGP, and then the world will know who I really was and what I really did and what I really thought. Also, maybe then they will understand that despite my actions, I'm not a bad person. I just have a disease contracted from society and it hurts a lot. I hope to complete this journal before I die, soon, or turn myself in. I still might do that, I think it's the right thing, but of course, I'm not sure. Speak of being sure, I wish I could be sure about my thoughts, but right now the only thing I'm sure about is that I'm sure about nothing. It is not a good position to be in considering my circumstances, being a felony fugitive and all. After this, his blog became radio silent. That was until this.
Breaking news out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho tonight. An Amber Alert. An 8-year-old and a 9-year-old missing. Their entire family wiped out.
The author of this blog was a man named Joseph Duncan, and in 2005, he was arrested for the murder of Brenda Groen, her boyfriend Mark McKenzie, and her 13-year-old son, Slade Groen. They were found bound with duct tape and brutally beaten to death in their home, where it was quickly discovered that Brenda's 2 other children, Shasta and Dylan, were missing. This became a weeks-long manhunt. Over 400 acres of land were thoroughly searched, but to no avail. That was until the police got a call from a local Denny's. In July 2005, a waitress noticed a young girl sitting with a middle-aged man. This girl looked as if she hadn't bathed in a while, and the middle-aged man would not take his eyes off of her. She then realized that this girl resembled Shasta, who was all over the news. When the police arrived, Joseph Duncan was arrested. Shasta had been kidnapped and held captive by Duncan for 48 days. Tragically, her brother was already dead, having been killed right in front of her. Duncan was officially sentenced to the death penalty in 2008, and around that time he confessed to the murder of Anthony Martinez. In 1997, while playing in a neighbor's yard, Duncan pulled up to the home and offered Anthony and his brother Marcos $1 to help find his lost cat. He then attempted to kidnap Marcos, who Anthony helped free, before being taken himself. 15 days later, his body was found naked and bound with duct tape. Shasta later told investigators that Duncan had told her about even more crimes, including the murder of Sammy Jo White and her half-sister Carmen Cubias, who were aged 11 and 9 respectively. Duncan himself would claim to have assaulted 13 young boys, with the earliest being when he was just 15 years old. In March of 2021, while awaiting the death penalty, Joseph Duncan was found dead after refusing treatment for brain cancer. The family of those affected by this pathetic man found solace in the fact that he could never harm anyone again, even if it wouldn't bring their family members back, and have made multiple public statements about it. A few months after his death, The Fifth Nail, the complete blogs of Joseph Edward Duncan, was published. These were the complete blogs of Joseph Edward Duncan, including previously lost material and extremely detailed confessions about his crimes. These confessions are so much worse than what we read on his blog, further demonstrating how morally broken and disgusting this man really was. The families this man tore apart are still very much within living memory. Shasta herself is just 28 years old, which is only a few years older than I am, and in 2024 her home burned down, leaving her helpless. She started a GoFundMe, which is still active as of now. Just a few days ago, as of writing this, a new update was shared. Hello everyone, please see the update from Shasta below. Sharing my story in Out of the Woods has been a roller coaster, incredibly hard but also incredibly empowering. Juggling life as a single mom of 5 amazing boys, building my new business, and speaking out for other survivors is a crazy ride, one step at a time. Your support and love mean the absolute world to me and my boys. Seriously, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm still working hard to be independent, but the truth is I still need a little help. My business will grow and the book royalties will come, but both are unpredictable. Right now, your generous donations to this GoFundMe are crucial. They'll cover things like school clothes, food, therapy, and most importantly, a new roof over our heads. We need to move soon, and a bigger place would be amazing for 5 growing boys. I'm dedicated to healing and using my voice to help others. Thank you for believing in me and helping me build a brighter future. I love you all. As the update suggests, Shasta just published a book about her experiences called Out in the Woods. In her own words, "For years it felt like screaming into the void. I yearned to share my story, but no one could truly listen. It was too much, too terrible to hear." I hope that this is the start of a much more peaceful chapter for her and her entire family, as well as the rest of the other families affected by the disgusting actions of Joseph Duncan, actions that were first revealed deep in the old internet. And though this story is thankfully over, he left behind people who are still creating theirs, people that deserve to have their story told so much more.
Imagine a world where every word ever written, every picture ever painted, and every film ever shot could be viewed instantly in your home.
During the mid-1990s, many people were being introduced to the internet for the very first time. It was a learning experience for everybody. In a sense, any website someone may have visited could have showed them something completely new. Unfortunately, there were some websites out there made to take advantage of this. Of all the different audiences that were being introduced to the internet that could possibly visit your website, perhaps one of the more easily deceived of these were the more religious crowd. During the old internet, a website was made to prey on their superstitions. That website was winkingjesus.com, featuring the miraculous Winking Jesus. The front quote of the website says, "On April 23, 1996, this picture of Jesus Christ miraculously winked at me. This experience has changed my life. Over 100,000 people have come to witness this miracle. Many people have had a lot to say about their experience. If you were fortunate enough to witness this image of Jesus Christ wink, please tell your friends and family about this miracle. Reverend Jonathan C. Chance." One of the notable sections of this website are the testimonies. These are hundreds of different comments from people who have witnessed the winking Jesus. So, what's the deal with it? Well, as you may have guessed, if you stare at this image for long enough, it has the ability to blink. That's because it wasn't an image, it was a GIF. However, there are a few tricks up its sleeve. Firstly, it blinks very quickly. Secondly, once it blinks, it won't blink again. To someone not very familiar with the internet at the time, this might have left them questioning if what they saw really happened, but then if you scroll down, there are hundreds of testimonies. Users could submit a testimony claiming to either have seen Jesus wink or not see him wink. So hundreds claimed that it was a miracle that Jesus winked at them, and hundreds said the opposite. As the website went on, it began selling merch. This included a Winking Jesus shirt, a Winking Jesus hoodie, and a Winking Jesus thong? I really wonder how many people this may have gotten at the time, or if it was mostly understood as being a prank. This website is genuinely hilarious and also absurd in a way, but I could genuinely see it tormenting somebody who was not very familiar with how the internet worked. I've been fascinated by the old internet for a very long time, and these haunting websites that slip through the cracks sometimes leave me thinking the most. Websites like the ones we explored tonight help us see both how much and how little we know of the world around us. They peer into the sides of people that you rarely are exposed to, while also showing us the depravity that could lie anywhere, which is perhaps the scariest part of this all.